This is the Entrepreneur Unleashed Show, episode 71 with Frank King. Hi, I'm Patty Keating, and I believe entrepreneurs are the future of the world. Over the past 2 decades, I've built 4 businesses in alignment with my values, giving me the freedom to live where I want and do what I love. I'm here to tell you that creating your successful business does not require struggle or sacrifice. So, how do you create the lifestyle business you love doing only what you love? Welcome to the Entrepreneur Unleashed podcast. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited that you're here today to join me as I interview Frank King. He's a former writer for The Tonight Show for 20 years. He's a full-time speaker and a comedian for 34 years.
Correct.
Yay. And I read that you have come close enough to dying by suicide that you could tell us what the barrel of a gun tastes like. That's not funny.
No, although spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger.
That is awesome. How are you today?
Depressed and suicidal, but that's always the case.
Oh dear. Well, let's talk about that. So, tell me about a little bit about you. Like I gave the short, intro, but tell us anything you'd like us to know.
Well, a question that comes up is, when did you first decide you wanted to be a comedian? And the answer is, when I was in 4th grade, I told my first joke, and everybody in the class laughed, including the teacher, by the way.
Uh-oh.
And I thought, I'm going to be a comedian. And then years later, high school, I took 3 years of drama, never got a good part, no speaking parts, always in the chorus. And I thought to myself, if I do stand-up comedy, I can write, direct, produce, and star my own little show every night. And just by chance, there was a 12th grade talent show, and nobody had ever done stand-up before. And I did stand-up, and, I'm sure it was horrible, but it rocked the high school house. And I went home and told my mama I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. And in our family, education was a big deal.
Uh-huh.
She goes, well, you're going to college first. You can do anything you like after college, son. You can be a goat herder if you choose, but you are going to be a goat herder with a college degree.
Uh-huh.
So I did 4 years at Chapel Hill, got 2 college degrees actually, and then moved to Southern California with my high school and college sweetheart.
Yeah.
And San Diego. And my first wife was not keen on the idea of me doing stand-up comedy. That was not part of her plan.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a comedy store in town, of a satellite outfit of the one on Sunset in Hollywood. And I would drive by there and feel a magnetic pull. So finally one night I went to open mic night just to see what the competition was like. And then I went a second time, and I got to tell you, the 75% of the people were awful. And it gave me the courage to get up and give it a try. That's the advice I give people who are thinking about doing stand-up. Look, go down to open mic night. See how bad 75% of the people are. It will give you the courage. So the third time I went down there, I got up on stage, I did my 5 minutes, and inside my head, I heard, "You're home." Uh-huh. And then my second thought was, I'm going to do this for a living. I have no idea how to make that work. And that was April Fool's Day, 1984. By Christmas '85, I had 10 weeks booked on the road, as a professional comedian.
Wow.
Asked my girlfriend, now my wife of 33 years, did she want to come on the road with me, just come along for the ride? And she said yes. And so we, everything we couldn't fit into my tiny little Dodge Colt, we put into storage, and we were on the road, she and I, for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop, no home, just a P.O. box and voicemail.
Wow.
Yep. And back then, they would put us up in a 3-bedroom condo with 2 other comedians. So we not only worked with, but we lived with Jeff Foxworthy, Ellen DeGeneres, and Paula Poundstone, and Rosie O'Donnell, and Dennis Miller, and Ron White, and everybody who was anybody on the circuit back in the day. Many of them now famous.
Yeah.
Then did a little radio, mid-90s as the comedy boom busted, and then I became a speaker. because the comedy clubs were closing faster than opening, and I'd been a clean comic all that time, so I thought I'll do the rubber chicken circuit, after dinner, after lunch. And so I joined the National Speakers Association, learned the speaking business, and was a corporate comic for about 10 years. And then the recession hit, and my business dropped off 80%. We lost everything we had put together in 25 years of marriage and a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like. And as I said, I didn't pull the trigger. A friend of mine came up to me after a keynote. He'd never heard me say that I didn't pull the trigger out loud. And he goes, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey, man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed?" Yeah. So if you know why I didn't pull the trigger, it's in my first of 5 TED Talks called A Matter of Laugh or Death on YouTube. And I'd always wanted to, when I got out of college, I was in the insurance business for about 6 years while I was ramping up my comedy career, and saw all the old school great motivational speakers, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, all those guys. And I thought, man, I could do that if I just had something to teach somebody. So after coming so close to dying by suicide and taking stock of my family's mental health, my grandmother died by suicide, my mother found her, my great aunt died by suicide.
Oh, yeah.
My mother and I found her, I was 4 years old. It runs in the family. It's called generational depression and suicide. I realized that's what I could talk about, suicide prevention. So that's what I do. I come in and start the conversation on suicide in an effort to prevent suicide.
Nice. And you've been doing that now how long?
Since my first TEDx in 2014.
Okay.
That allowed me to rebrand because everybody thought of me as a comedian, a funny guy. So I thought I need a way to rebrand to let everybody know that I can talk about something serious with some comic relief.
Yeah.
And so that first TED Talk and the 4 that followed allowed me to rebrand, gave me some credibility as a speaker, help with the marketing, obviously.
Yeah.
And so, and I to this day I'm applying for, I've got three TED Talk ideas that I alternatively fill out an application, in each one and send them off.
So what's your vision for this, for what you're doing? So let's go out 5 years. Like what's your vision? Well,
I would continue doing this. We have a series of books coming out. First one's already out, volume 1, called Guts, Grit, and the Grind, a Mental Mechanics Manual. It's a book on mental health for men. It's an anthology. It's sort of like chicken soup for the tortured man's soul. 12 stories, 12 guys. Each one has an issue, and each one talks about how it happened and how they're coping. And volume 1 came out in March, and I voiced it. So I narrated it.
Yeah.
If you go to my website, thementalhealthcomedian.com, and put in an email address, you can download a free MP3 copy of the unabridged audiobook, and I'm narrating it.
Yeah, we'll put that link on the show notes, guys. So if you guys want to check it out, go to the show notes at pattykeating.com, click on podcast, and it'll be right there on the page.
Yeah, so we're book 2 should come out sometime this summer, 3 and 4 before the end of the year, because 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide in the U.S. are men.
89%. Is that what you said?
80% of people who die by suicide are men.
Wow.
Age 45, 54. And it's epidemic. And part of the problem is male toxicity, masculine toxicity, where, big boys don't cry.
Yeah.
They don't reach out for help. And
don't show your feelings.
Yeah. And so we're striving in the next 4 or 5 years to bring the suicide rate down, and bring the suicide rate down for everybody, but for men in particular, because the COVID is not helping.
Right.
They believe, the last stats I saw were they're expecting 75,000 more what they call deaths of despair by suicide in the next year.
Wow.
Yeah. So now
you got your hands full. You got some work to do.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to work myself out of a job, Patty, if I could, long-term goal. Somebody says to me, how come you're not speaking about suicide prevention anymore? Well, people quit killing themselves. So,
yeah.
But that's rather audacious of a goal. But, you can work toward that.
Hey, yeah, it's a vision. So what's the best advice you ever received?
The riches are in the niches. In other words, in speaking, there are a lot of people who speak on a lot of things. They're generalists. They can, people say, I can talk about anything. Well, that's great, but that's going to be a little hard to market.
Yeah.
So I picked the niche of suicide prevention, which is a rather narrow niche. And then I picked 4 or 5 occupations in that niche that have a high rate of suicide. Dentists, veterinarians, healthcare, construction has the #1 rate of suicide as an occupation.
Construction?
Yep.
Huh.
Again, because it's male heavy demographic. It's rough and tough guys, the kind of guys who wouldn't normally reach out for any sort of help.
Yeah.
So for my first niche was suicide prevention, and then I niched it even further to just 4 or 5 occupations that have a high rate. I tell my speaking coaching clients, you need to find your ideal client, and it sounds like this. Somebody that has an annual meeting, they use outside speakers, they have enough money to pay my fee, and most important, they have a bleeding need to hear what it is that I have to say.
Yeah.
They're trying to do something about the suicide rate, so they're reaching out looking for help.
Yeah.
So that's the best piece of advice, and I ignored it for years, decades. And then when I hit on suicide prevention, I thought that's my lane.
There you go. I love a lot of this because it's so purposeful. Like you are being who you are and bringing all of you to the table in service of humanity.
Well, and my favorite speaker coaching clients are the ones who have what they speak on is organic. People ask me, how did you choose depression and suicide as a topic? Well, the topic chose me. Mm-hmm. I've got a client who has narcolepsy, and she wants to do a TED Talk on sleep disorders and narcolepsy. And she picked it because she was 23 years old. She's in law school. She thought everybody was that tired, and then went to see a sleep doctor and found out, no, you have narcolepsy.
Wow.
So yeah, that's my kind of, if whatever it is you want to speak on, it's your passion and it's organic to you.
Yep.
That's the easiest to get a TED Talk. That's the easiest to get a speaking career going, because again, you pick the lane, you pick the niche, and it's really, you go to bed thinking about it, wake up thinking about it. So that was the best advice I ever had, was don't be a specialist. Don't be a generalist. Be a specialist.
So once you really dialed in your niche and your industries, who you're serving, what personal growth did you personally experience?
Well, a couple things. One, it's very therapeutic, going on stage, and as Brene Brown would say, vulnerability is my superpower. I go up there and I bare my soul, especially for a guy to go on and talk about the sort of things I talk about. Yeah. And being vulnerable. What it does is it gives other people permission to give voice to their experiences and their feelings surrounding depression, thoughts of suicide. So my job really is simply to get up there and start the conversation. Because I discovered early on, even though one person dies of suicide every 11 minutes in the US, hardly anybody talks about it. But if you bring it up, if you merely mention it, almost everybody has a story. So that part's therapeutic for me, sharing that way. And then I do a general Q&A at the end, and I say to the audience, look, if you have a question you don't want to ask in front of everybody, hey, I'm crazy, can you help me? I'll hang around afterwards, and I'll take the questions individually until they're all answered. And I'm telling you, and I warn my speakers who speak on a topic like this, you need to set aside an extra 30 minutes after you get done speaking, because people will come up and want to share a story. Yeah. And people come up, and sometimes one person, sometimes 8. I have a condition called chronic suicidal ideation, which means for me and people like me, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. When I say small, my car broke down a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts unbidden: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself.
Wow.
There are a lot of people out there who have that, and they come to my presentation and they arrived not knowing that condition had a name. They just think they're some kind of freak because of the way their brain works. And when they hear me say that out loud and realize they're not alone, I had a young woman come up to me after a college show. She said, "Thank you for your keynote." I said, "You're welcome." She said, well, I want to tell you, it made me weep. How did it make you weep? She said, well, you know your story about the car? Get it fixed, buy a new one, or you could just kill yourself. She goes, I've been having those thoughts all my life. I thought it was just me. I didn't know it had a name. I thought I was some kind of freak. And when I heard you say that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I am not, in fact, alone. I wept.
That's so awesome. That's really
That, and it occurred to me, Patty, that because it happens over and over and over, and perhaps I've steered people like that just far enough off the path to suicide to live a normal life.
Yeah.
I feel like the character George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. Is I've been shown over and over what these people's lives would be like if I weren't there to let them know that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And my second thought was, I can't kill myself now because if I did, I would take all those people with me.
That's right.
Yep. So it's so that by the way is very therapeutic. Helping somebody like that, letting them know that they in fact are not. I had a woman come up at a dental conference where I spoke, and she was crying so hard she couldn't speak. And I said, "You got chronic suicidal ideation." She nodded. I go, "You didn't know I had a name?" Nod. I said, "Do you have a therapist back home?" Nod. Well, when you get back home, set up an appointment. Tell them everything you learned today, and for goodness sakes, tell them you Googled it. Don't tell them you learned it from a comedian. And a week later, I get an email from her. Frank, I think I was at a dental conference just to meet you. You have changed my life, and I can't say that about a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
the best, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, that's amazingly therapeutic.
So tell me about some of the tools and resources you use. What kind of gadgets or tools do you use to make your life easier when you're booked out speaking like you are and with clients?
How do you mean, like business tools or mental tools?
Well, either. You choose.
Okay, well, I coach speakers, and there are a good number of them, not as old as I'm 63, but people who are of an age, and they want more speaking gigs. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, here's the deal. You need a podcast. Mm-hmm. And you need to appear on 2 podcasts a week in your topic area. And if you go to podcastguests.com, you can put up a profile, and you can both be a guest and find guests. Mm-hmm. And then once you've got the podcast recorded, make sure you share them all over your social media. Make sure you share the links from the podcast where you guested, if that's a word, guested. And it should be. It is now. And make sure it goes up on YouTube, because YouTube transcribes it for their closed captioning. So when Google comes looking for keywords in a search, they do audio search, they do text search. So you get both those in terms of SEO. I recommend that they have a website if they're going to be a speaker or whatever your gig is. Again, back to the riches are in the niches. You should have a website that is just about that and only that. When you go to my website, it screams suicide prevention. This is the guy, rather than being a generalist. Right. If you write a book, make sure the name of the book and the name of the podcast and your URL are all roughly the same, so you begin to brand. I tell you, when you get 6 or 7 episodes on your podcast and you've got interesting guests, have that transcribed, make each guest a chapter in the book, and it's whatever your podcast is, named Volume 1, an easy way to write a book with some interesting, 6 or 7 interesting stories about your guests. Yeah. So you're repurposing the material. You're putting it on a podcast, on social media, in a book. Again, the idea being that you are generating a lot of new content, and you know how Google loves new content. Oh, yeah. And it's chock full of keywords. So that's my advice to, have a presence on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great platform. I've got 15,769 connections. But I'm very active going after either people in my target markets, or I coach TEDx. So I'm looking for authors, speakers, and coaches, people who would probably want to do a TEDx. So and I believe in, what it used to say, ABC, always be closing. I believe always be connecting. Yeah. So when I pitch somebody on LinkedIn, it's just pitching a virtual cup of coffee just to get to know each other and network a little bit and see if there's something we could do for one another. Yeah. And I found people who had no idea how to, apply for a TED Talk. In 30 minutes, I can teach them how to apply. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So what about resources as far as books, podcasts you mentioned, blogs? What are you reading? What are you listening to?
I read nothing. That's another piece of advice I give people my age. I go, look, you got a book? Yeah. Well, do you have an audio version? No. Do I need one? Duh. Uh, I listen. Everything I consume book-wise, I consume on Audible.
Yeah.
And then I encourage them to voice it themselves. I go, it's your voice. It's your story. You should, well, I don't have a good voice. You don't need a great, radio guy voice. You have a human voice. It's your story. I'll show you. I'll give you a couple of tips and techniques that'll make it really easy for you. I got a great audio editor on Fiverr who's really inexpensive and makes me sound amazing. Mm-hmm. And I'll turn you on to him. And, if it's a 150-page book, it'll cost you like $200 to get it mastered for Audible, and you're on your way. So I would say audiobook is a great tool. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing about an audiobook is I tell my clients, look, you need something to give away on your website of value to collect email addresses so you'll know who the heck came by. Yeah. So like I said, you go to my website, you get a free download, the 4 hours and 15-minute unabridged, book on men's mental health. On my TEDx site, I give away a PDF, 6 things you can do to kill your chances to get a TEDx. And it's, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but it really is good, solid advice on here's what you don't do if you want a TEDx.
So Frank, looking back at your life, if you were to do this all over again, what would you tell your younger self?
When Sandra Schrift in San Diego in 1996, when I was starting comedy and had just transferred to the San Diego chapter of the National Speakers Association, Sandra took me aside. She had a little speakers bureau. She said, Frank, you can do stand-up comedy and speak. They're not mutually exclusive. And I thought, no, I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm not a speaker. If I had done that then, I would be living in a much larger house.
So listen to the advice you're given. Is that what you would tell your younger self?
That is the best advice I ever ignored was, I could have done both simultaneously. Because here's the deal. People ask me, what's the difference between a club comic and a corporate comic, or a club comic and a speaker? About $7,500 a day plus travel. So had I known, if that's the one piece of advice I would have taken, is I would have had like parallel careers. I would continue, and my comedy was clean. I could easily do corporate comedy, HR friendly. Yeah. They pay me, by the way, not for the jokes I tell at a corporate event. It's for the jokes I don't tell. And the wisdom to know the difference. To make sure the HR person still has a job when I get done with my job is really what I'm after.
Thank you so much for sharing what you're up to. Really appreciate it. And I appreciate the work you're doing as well.
Well, it's my passion and my purpose. It's like breathing. I tell my speakers when I'm coaching them, look, TEDx, here's what I want you to tell me. If I woke you from a sound sleep and said, give me 45 minutes on something, what would it be? And it's usually what they're passionate about. Oh, I can talk 45 minutes on bingo. Okay, that's our TEDx topic. Now, let's just find where the idea we're spreading is in that topic. Yeah. Because passion's the number one thing, I believe, with a TEDx. So you need to be passionate about it.
Yeah. And in business, I believe once you have that why, everything else works out.
And I've told that to people many times. It's that my why is one person dies every 11 minutes in the US by suicide. Yeah. One person in my tribe. Mm-hmm. And the good news is we can make a difference. We can save a life, and we can do it by doing something as simple as you and I are doing right here. Yeah. And that starts the conversation. And that's my why.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate you.
I hope I didn't talk too much, Patty.
No, you're awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome. I'm recording this episode from my home office during self-quarantine as we were all asked to stay home due to the coronavirus. If you like what you hear and you'd like to hear more, please join me in my Facebook group. It's called the Unleashed Entrepreneurs. You can search that on Facebook. Come on over. It's a community of thriving entrepreneurs making a difference in the world, doing what they love, and changing lives. Hope to see you there. Enjoy the show. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have you ever wondered what you could do to make your own business and grow it online? Head on over to pattykeating.com and take the entrepreneur code. You'll discover your unique value, your personality style, and how you can combine those two into a thriving business that helps people and lets you make money doing what you love. I'll see you there. Bye for now.